Welcome all to the first episode of IBAN's new podcast, Lessons Learned, where we discuss angel investments that did not quite go as planned and try to learn from people smarter than us. For this first episode, we have the privilege to start off with our guest, Peter Cowley, who is not only the IBAN President Emeritus, but also a board member of GBAN and the former chair of the Cambridge Angels. But Peter is here with his role as an angel investor, and as he proudly puts on his LinkedIn, he has 75 plus investments, 18 exits, and 20 failures. And it is those failures that he's here to talk about today. But before that, we'd like to acknowledge that Peter is actually the inspiration behind this podcast, thanks to his book, The Invested Investor. Peter will be soon putting out a new book that he can also tell us more about during this podcast. So Peter, off to you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your story as an angel, your successes, your failures, and your lessons learned?
So my background is engineering and computer science at uni. I worked in a big company for a while, which I think helps all entrepreneurs because they understand internal processes and people politics and things. And then I formed my first business in Bavaria back in 1981. Came back to the UK and I've set up over a dozen businesses since then, still running two. One is the publishing company and one is a tech company still. I did these businesses were either tech or property. And then probably 20 years ago, I got involved in social enterprises and charities, did quite a lot of that. And 15 years ago, I stumbled into angel investing by mistake, by investing in somebody I was mentoring. Really enjoyed that. So really embraced the life as an angel, really, despite the risks and the ups and downs and everything, as we'll talk about. And then I got noticed in the UK as Angel of the Year, and then I got noticed by something else. And then I was on the board of the trade body here in the UK for angel investing. I became president of IBAN, on the board of the Global Business Angel Network. And then I also wrote a couple of books because I wanted to scale myself so I could help other people. I've done 83 podcasts, which are online on the website. And then I actually are backing off gradually now for a number of reasons. One is, as you know, I've got late stage cancer, so it's a matter of getting things sorted out. And I'm writing the other book. So I've had with my own businesses and the ones I've invested in, I've been on 90 journeys and I've been on 40 boards. So, and I've seen successes, some good successes and some pretty awful failures. So shall we talk about those?
Absolutely. But I see that you have behind you actually the award that we gave you a couple of years ago. That was one of your biggest successes. So maybe we can start off with this big success and then you can follow up with some of your favorite failures.
Okay, the two successes, there are actually two awards there, but you only recognize one of them, I suspect. They're both the same year. They were Exit of the Year. It wasn't quite called that for IBAN. We were in Cork in Ireland at the time, but I also got the same in the UK, in London for the UK BAA. Those two businesses are very different. The one that was a success with IBAN was a company that I'd taken out of an accelerator, was on the board for a decade. It pivoted heavily in the middle of it. It struggled a bit to raise money, but we still exited for a number that's not in the public domain, but it's certainly well in excess of $50 million. And we'd gone in at a valuation of £500,000, which is about $600,000. So although there was money put in, it was still a good multiple over a period of time. And I think the award that I was given. Sorry, that was the London award. The one that in IBAN was a fulfillment house that started off as a tech business, and that also pivoted, very common, into a service business and grew. And actually, unusually for angel investors, or certainly in my experience as a tech investor, actually exited as a multiple of its profit. So it's actually, my portfolio I've still got 40 or so companies. There's probably only about 2 or 3 of them making a profit. Everything else is just still growing and consuming investment from angels and from venture capitalists. So in both cases, I was on the board. Both I enjoyed tremendously. I hopefully gave something and taught them something, certainly mentored them, and I got lots back from the entrepreneurs. So one was 100 and something times the investment, which is on my website, and the other was a much smaller multiple, but I'd put more money in, so the amount of money I got out was the same. But as I've said many times on many stages, I don't do this for the money return. I've always would hope I'll get back the money plus a pound or a euro or a dollar or something, which I have done easily, but I do it because I enjoy working with the entrepreneurs.
And that is very clear from your book as well for anyone who's read it. So do you want to tell us a bit about how you arrived to write this?
The reason I wrote it, which was back in 2017, so 6 years ago, or it started the year before, is I'd been mentoring quite a lot of people one-to-one. One's on the boards I was on, just one-to-one anyway. I live in Cambridge in the UK. There's a lot of entrepreneurial activity here, both within the university and spinning out and in the community anyway. And I was lecturing 20 people, 30 people, 40 people, even 200 or 300 people. But I just decided I want a bigger audience than that, because I felt I had something to say, and people certainly thought it was good that I was saying it. Partly the way I do it, partly my experience, partly my honesty, transparency, etc. So I then started the process with my youngest son actually, of generating podcasts, interviewed 80 odd people, and then decided to write the book. So the book is purely what I'd learned over the previous 10 or 11 years. And I've updated it twice, actually. So the one, it's now on issue 3, which has got an extra chapter about my learnings, which is also, actually, the extra chapter is also readable for free on my website. On Lifelong Learnings, I think the tab's called. So if you look at petercowley.org, Life Learnings it's called, you will be able to read what I've learned. So much of what I'm about to say in the next few minutes is on there, except to be in a more dynamic way than reading it.
So that's exactly what I wanted to focus on, this specific chapter, and the main learnings that you can share with us as an angel, and the stories that gifted you those learnings.
Oh, we haven't got 3 hours, have we? 4 hours, 5 hours. So let's just talk about failures, because learn much more about a failure than a success. That's what it's all about. And my criteria, I don't invest any longer. My criteria on the website, and one of them says I'd rather invest in an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial team that's failed, and rather than one that hasn't tried yet, providing they're very open and honest about the failure. So yeah, it's the failures that matter. And generally, and if you look at it, they're all the descriptions of why they failed are all on the website. It's because they haven't got to product market fit before they haven't got to product market fit, and the investment money runs out. So I'll just explain that. Obviously, it depends on the audience, but product market fit is having a product or service that fits with the market, which means the market is buying that product or service at a profit. Anybody can sell stuff at a loss, but if you want to sell it at a profit, enough profit to run the business, you've got to get to that point. Before you get to that point, i.e. generating enough profit to run the business, where do you get the money from to pay the salaries? You've got to get it from investors. You might get some debt. You'll certainly get some grants if you're a deepish tech company, deep tech, but it's generally from investors. And if you've gone along the journey and the investors lose faith in your business, I'm talking to the entrepreneurs here, then they, of course, the entrepreneurs want to continue the business, and they will try and find other investors. But if the original investors are not investing, it's very difficult to find new investors. So the money will then run out. So so at that point, the entrepreneurial team has 3 choices. One is to shrink far enough, remove staff and costs so they can get to break even, so they don't rely on investors. Second one is to sell the business. But if you sell in a hurry, you always get a terrible price. Or thirdly, unfortunately, is the case with these 20 companies here, they close down. So it's product market fit without losing the faith of the investors. Of course, there are other reasons why they fail sometimes. The technology doesn't work. The competition jumps in. something big happens, although I'm not invested in hospitality, can you imagine what COVID will have done to the hospitality industry?
In your experience, then, what are the biggest learnings you can take away from a failure as an entrepreneur and as an investor?
Yeah, so talking here on the viewpoint of an investor, in the very early days, I'm very technical. You can't see, but I'm wearing 2 watches and collect a lot of data, and et cetera, et cetera. Initially, I used to fall in love, not fall in love, but be influenced by the technology and the market, and sometimes pretending myself as a customer. That's not right. In the end, it took me about 3 years to learn it's only the people that matter. As I've said many times, I invest, and all angel investors should be investing in people with a plan rather than plan with people. So it's the people that matter, because they're the ones who are going to run the company. You're not running it as an investor. They're running it. They're spending their 40 or 50 or even more hours a week doing it. They've got to be able to learn and listen so they can then move around as the market moves. They can pivot strongly if they need to, etc. So it's making sure you invest in, and I keep on using the word people, because a single founder will struggle to get investment from angels. It's usually 2, possibly 3, very occasionally 4. But single founders do it sometimes, but it's really difficult. It's usually 2. One probably with a commercial focus and one with a technological focus if it's a product company. So invest in the people. But then, of course, they're going to make mistakes. And that's where you come in. Not all investors need to do this, but the entrepreneurs will need some level of assistance. And that's what I've helped. And it generally, although it's not true exclusively, investors that have had an entrepreneurial career are more likely to be able to help the entrepreneurs, because of course they've experienced the ups and downs, and there's all kinds of things to do with hiring and lots of things, market, raising more money, etc. So it comes down to the people, and the people generally must be passionate, driven, focused, which is true of all entrepreneurs, but they must also be able to listen, and they must be listen to the market, listen to regulators, maybe even listen to me sometimes. But more importantly, also as important, they must be honest with themselves. They must be honest about their background before we invest in them, and they must be honest on the route. So if there is an issue, they will come back to the investors or the board or whatever and talk it through, and not keep it to themselves. That's really important. So it comes down to the people. Of course, it still goes wrong. I mean, the reason I've got 20 failures in each case. Not the reason. In each case, I've believed in the entrepreneurs when they pitched to me. I've probably believed in them when they came back for money once or twice. But at some point, I've just lost faith that entrepreneurial team can achieve something, and therefore it's failed.
So can you, if you would feel comfortable with that, share a specific story where you felt that you trusted the technology, where you should have put your trust in a team instead?
Yeah, there's a great one here. I shouldn't go into too much detail, possibly, because this involves human beings. But there's a technology here. I'll just say it's a printing technology. People can look it up on our website, where the technology was super cunning. I bought into it completely. Big printers print on paper using ink or laser, etc. This technology used really cheap photographic paper and printed on it using light. So the photographic paper was then printed on with light, which was obviously free, light free. The capital equipment's there, but it's free because there's no ink or anything else or toner. And then it was processed. So at the end of it, you've got something that's printed in color that's probably a third the price and 3 times better quality. The density of the dots, it was a brilliant picture, but it didn't work. They couldn't get it to market. It was somewhere where I really fell in love with the technology and the market and the reason people would buy it. But unfortunately, the team couldn't get it to the point where the market would buy it. So there's an example of where I've fallen in love with the technology and not the team. And of course, I have done it in people who then pivoted heavily. I mean, the example earlier, James and James, it was a tech business. I only invest in tech businesses. It became, within 2 years, it became a service business. I don't invest in service businesses because service businesses scale with people. They don't scale with, computing power or something. But I was already on the journey. I was chair of the company, and that was a great exit, as it turns out. So again, I backed the people. I wasn't that excited in the tech, but it created a big company. In fact, it's gone on. I was there last week, and it's now turning over about 70 million euros from from whatever it was, 300,000 euros when I joined it. So
with all the experience that your failures have given you, and your insistence in your books, but also in other articles I've read from you, that really you can't learn from a success as much as you learn from a failure. If you had the chance to go back and make all those failures right, would you?
Well, there's two ways of looking at that. One, the obvious thing to say is I wouldn't necessarily have invested in some of them. Some of them I definitely would have done. Other things have happened, but with hindsight, I wouldn't have invested. And of course, then I wouldn't understand what had happened, because I've looked at 15,000 business plans in the last 12, 13 years and only invested in 70 something of them. Therefore, there are another, whatever it is, 14,900 journeys I haven't followed. And of course, so I just, if I hadn't invested, I don't know what would have happened to them. They might have done really well, of course, or not. So that's part of it. The other part is, if I was close to the company, on the board or an interested shareholder, and I'd invested, could I have helped it succeed? That's a big question, and it's a very theoretical question. I suspect not, because I've been so involved with my investments, I've put as much as I can into it. I don't think there's any of them where I've been close to where I regret that we didn't do something. You just got to remember, as an angel investor, that it is a numbers game. I've said this many times on many stages, and you've just got to accept that you can't always get it right.
How could you avoid getting too emotionally involved in a failure?
Another thing that I learned quite early on, probably after 3 or 4 years, is that when I've written, as they say, a check, I transfer the money into the investment, I write it off. There's a strange thing to say, but at that point, the money is turned into a share certificate in a company, which something will happen to that at some point in the next few years. And my view is, although I will help the company as much as possible, I don't expect to get it back. So that I do get some of it back, which means I don't even get the full amount back, I get a percentage, I'm still happy. Because in the end, once you've got a share certificate in a company, which is an ownership certificate, you can't do anything with it. You can't sell it to anybody until there's some liquidity event. So I write it off. That way I don't get emotionally involved in the failures when they happen. Now, you can't easily do that, as we will have talked about, if you've only got 2 or 3, because it's a huge proportion of your portfolio. But if you've got to not as many as 75 like me, but even got to 20 or so, losing a few actually should not matter. So don't get too emotionally involved in the failure in the companies, so that if they do fail, you're not disappointed. It's just write it off as soon as you transfer the money the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. On the numbers games front, I believe that is one also of your learnings that is included in that new chapter. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, there's a lot of research being done all over the world, particularly in America, because there's much more activity in America than anywhere else, on how big a portfolio an angel should get to. And the numbers which I come up with, which are in the chapter, are 15, not 2, 3, 4, or 5. 15 is about the minimum that one should invest in. Hard work to find, particularly if you're in a country where there's not that much entrepreneurial activity. 15, but the 15, you get to the point where you can't follow them quite so easily. There isn't enough time. When if you're a full-time CEO of a company, then you can't follow any of them. But if you're doing it as a life, or not professionally, but as a lifestyle, really, then 15 is about the maximum. But the data from the States particularly says 20 to 25. When you get to 20 or 25, you've got a very good chance that you will at least get your money back. Not that you're going to make lots of money, but that you will So if you put, say, 100,000 euros in, you'll get 100,000 euros back over time, and not 90 or 80. If you put it into 2 or 3 companies, there's actually a good chance you'll get nothing back. You'll lose it all. So that's the 25. And then when you get to 45, you get to the part, which I have done, of course, and quite a lot of my friends who invest have. That's just getting too much. The spreadsheet's getting longer and longer, and every single business probably needs some transaction every year, either money or change of some articles or option granting, whatever. So you're signing a piece of paper every week at 45. And then I got to 75, and I know people have had more investments than that. But they say that at 90 you'll bump into a unicorn. A unicorn's a mythical creature. People use it as a measure of success, but I've never bumped into a unicorn.
Would you add to this chapter if you wrote it again today?
That's a really good question, and you've caught me out with that one, because I stopped investing. I intended to stop investing when I got to 65, and I'm 68 now, just because it takes 10 or 15 years to get a good exit. 65 plus 10 or 15 years is 75 or 80. And I wanted to try and outlive all my investments. So I slowed down. Then when I found I had cancer a year later, I stopped investing at all. In that year in between, I invested about nine companies as follow-on rounds. So I don't think in the last, and of course, COVID's got in the way of all this very strange activities. I don't think I've probably learned anything other than what's in this chapter since then. I should add, on the next book, I'm at the present moment actually writing a letter to my teenage self about my personal life. That's another story. That's not specific to EBAN, of course, but there's a lot of learnings that I've worked out I should have known before. Of course, we can't do that. That's in human nature. You can't have the knowledge of a 68-year-old when you're 18. Otherwise, you'd be old beyond your time, wouldn't take any risk. So, no, I honestly, at the moment, there are 12 or 13 things on my website. I don't think I would have changed any of those.
Of course, for all the other learnings, people can find them on your website or on your book, The Invested Investor. Is there any of them particularly you'd like to highlight?
As an angel investor, assuming you're going to spend some time, and you don't have to use much time, perhaps half a day a week. You can't spend half a day a month, half a day a week, 1 day a week. What you've got to do is work out what your appetite is in terms of risk, but also what you want to back, so that you will set up with a set of rules, and I have my 13 criteria on the website, and try and stick with that. I mean, in the end, you're backing good people. That's what it's got to be. As a newbie angel, really difficult to work out who good people are. So then you should probably, if you can do, be part of an angel group and learn from that group and follow people you believe understand what good people are. So set up as something that you're happy with and sort of stick to it. I mean, it does mean you'll miss out. I've missed out some really quite good. I've got a slide of all the ones that got away, including some quite big ones, but just got to accept that. So and if you can do, you've got to enjoy what you do. You shouldn't really be using it as an asset class. If it's used as an asset class, you're better off investing in a fund and let somebody else do it. Whether it's success or not, who knows? But you've got to be there so you can help, not hinder, not bully, not negatively affect the journeys, but just help and watch them and connect them and so on. So it's not a hobby at all. It's a serious occupation where you're actually risking a lot of capital. Enough capital, depending who you are, probably enough capital to almost buy a house, certainly buy several cars. It shouldn't be life-changing if you lose it, but at the same time, it can make a big difference to either your life or your children, who might inherit your wealth.
What you just said, the ones that got away, could also be a topic for a great podcast. Probably a longer conversation than we have time for in this one.
Yeah.
But we've talked quite a lot about your book, The Invested Investor. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, Public Success, Private Grief?
I will do. I'm sure you'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's going to be a difficult book to read, and you know a little bit about it, both of you. Many people don't, but I have some success. You mentioned that earlier on. I'm quite well known in this field. I've helped a lot of people, I believe, over the years. I've also had some pretty horrendous things happen to me in my life in terms of my cancer, obviously, though I'm working through that. But more importantly, my son, who I set up an investor with, actually was on the board of EBAN for a while and died last year. And his older brother actually died 14 years ago. So I've actually lost two children, which is a tragic thing that any parents who are listening to this shouldn't imagine themselves in. It's a horrible place to think about being in. But somehow with those and other tragedies, which you'll read about on the website and if you read the book, I've somehow got through those, processed those with the assistance of professional help and processing myself. And it's somehow in some way, which I haven't worked out yet, actually helped me grow as a person and help others. It's I really don't, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know how I've done it, but I am as a person, somebody that's surprisingly, not happy is the wrong word, but surprisingly positive about what I do and what I give, despite what I've been through. That's why it's called public success, private grief. And in fact, it won't be private, the grief, because I'm sharing it now.
Yeah, well, on behalf of EBAN, I will say that I've always admired your positivity. This book, you've said it will be available for pre-order very soon. Is that correct?
The website's got a link where you can register to be part of the community, and then in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, that'll get replaced. Well, we can still be part of the community, but there'll be a pre-order. And then it'll be launched in the middle of April, and the pre-orders will be distributed to everybody who's bought them or maybe comes to get a signed copy here in Cambridge sometime end of March, early April. So that's the intention. I need, of course, to remain healthy during this process because my cancer, I have a YouTube channel called Project Cancer, which I hope you'll also put in the show notes, which shows where I am on my cancer journey and the risks in terms of my health and my longevity.
So for everyone listening, the links to Peter's book and, well, to Peter's books, plural, and to the YouTube channel will be in the description of this podcast. Peter, I want to thank you so much for doing this with us. Is there any last you want to leave us with? No,
I got involved with EBAN many years ago, probably 10 years ago, well before your time. And I've really learned an awful lot about that. The actual nitty-gritty of angel investing, not so much, because I've learned so much here in Cambridge, but it's the cross-border, it's the bigger picture, it's Europe. It's also, because of that, I've been involved in events in all over the world, South Africa, Canada, States, etc. And it's just a great community that I have been part of. And obviously, when I was president for 2 or 3 years, I contributed to. So just a bit of a plug for EBAN there. And thank you for giving it back to us then and using your knowledge to teach us now. Yeah. So thank you so much for doing this once again. We're really grateful to be learning from people like you, and thank you also for the inspiration for this podcast. Good. Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you.